Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
Yeah, hello and thank you for tuning in for another episode of Greats with Garby. I've been desperate to get a cricketer on since we launched, and I'm delighted that this man is our debut interview from the great game. He played 20 test matches for Australia, most of them wins, including a hat-trick on debut, and of course he was infamously robbed of another one thanks to a certain SK Warne. He was part of Australia's 1999 World Cup triumph as well, where he famously bowled the final over of that epic semi-final and rolled the ball to Adam Gilchrist for that memorable victory, and has since turned to a life in the media where he was one of the most insightful, or is one of the most insightful and entertaining commentators in the game. He is Damien Fleming, and he's with me now from Melbourne. Flem, great to see you with a flourishing beard. How is life?
Yeah, I think I'm morphing into W.G. Grace. I love my cricket history, and I've gone back and reading old cricket books because I've got a massive cricket library. But my old roommate, Mervyn Hughes, had probably Australia's most famous moustache for years. Well, he still does. And now I can sort of relate to it because, you know, I used to have a goatee when I played for Australia. Never the flush beard because it got itchy, but I'm past the itchy phase now, so that can tell you what we're living in, what environment we're living in Melbourne at the moment. But, mate, thanks for getting me on your podcast. I tend to deliver on debut, okay?
You do. Great point. A hat-trick on debut, which we'll get into, and an incredible 6 for 37 on your first-class debut for Victoria, which we'll get onto as well. But you're a bit of a cricketing nerd. Yes, you're a funny man, but, I mean, you've got the Bowlology Report podcast as well. The background, people can't see this, but the background of your Zoom is the Bowlology Report, like a TV news set almost. It's so professional. So you're fully into that, and your work with Channel 7 and on radio as well. I dare say you love it.
No, it is, Daniel. I mean, you know, I grew up loving, you know, in particular cricket and AFL and the rock band Kiss, who the people won't be able to see, but I'm having a coffee at the moment. It's my Kiss coffee mug. But, you know, really it ignited for me was Dennis Lillee was my idol, and my dad took me to the MCG the day that Dennis broke the record, Lance Gibbs's record, 309 test wickets. And, you know, he broke it. I was down at third man and he was fielding fine leg, but Dennis was overcome by the situation, come down to third man. He's only metres away. And I reckon that's what really spurned the love. You know, debuted for Victoria at 18. And now I'm 50 and probably been working in the media longer than my actual playing career. Very, very happy, but absolutely love it. As you said, in lockdown here, I'm reading every cricket book that's ever been read. I'm watching the England-Pakistan series. I'm loving the World Series Classics on Fox. So by the time the season hits, Dan, I'll be well researched.
And you featured in a few of those, which we'll touch on. But, you know, you are known as a bit of a funny man in the cricket commentary circles, despite being such a nerd about the game and so insightful, especially when it comes to bowling. That niche, if you like, where you do provide a bit more humour than some of the others, is that something you thought might work for you in the media game, or is it just Damien Fleming el natural?
No, it's pretty natural. I don't know. Some people say laugh at what I say, but sometimes they're laughing at me, not with me. That's the gauge.
As long as they're laughing.
To be fair, in the dressing room, my teammates used to say that I talked a lot of shit, and now I'm getting paid for it right now. You know, you don't see Michael Bevan or Damien Martin, do you? Hey? Although you do see Michael Bevan on reality shows.
Yes.
But, no, certainly it's the personality, and, you know, I always enjoyed not the traditional cricket media, you know, coming through. You know, I was lucky while I was probably getting a lot of experience on ABC grandstand cricket I was also working on Triple M, because of my love of hard rock and filling in for breakfasts and afternoon shifts. So, certainly my personality is love the sport, but also love the entertainment side of it as well. And as a swing bowler and fielding, it's like when we first started isolation, Dan, people say how you're handling it. Well, the thing is, as a specialist fine leg fieldsman, I've basically been in isolation for half my cricket career. I'm used to it, spending time by myself. So, I think being a swing bowler, you've got to have a good sense of humour, because there's times, particularly playing in India and Pakistan and places like that, bowling to their batsmen. But, no, it's been enjoyable and may it last for as long as it can.
When you retired and went pretty much straight into the media, it was about 2003. Times have changed now because the media landscape in cricket has opened up so much. But back then, while yes, there was radio work, when it came to TV, there probably was a bit of elitism, wasn't there, when it came to commentary? I mean, it was Channel 9, and let's be honest, you pretty much had to have captained Australia to get on that commentary team or have been a big international star. As someone who wanted to get into the media, was that intimidating at all, or maybe a bit confronting? Where do I find myself in this media landscape considering that?
I can't believe they went Steve Waugh over me for the captaincy. As soon as I heard Steve Waugh announced, I went, there goes my Channel 9 career. I'm cooked. But a lot of things fell into place. I retired a lot earlier than I wanted to. A third shoulder reconstruction at 31, 32. I wanted to keep playing, but I actually got offered a coaching role at the Cricket Academy. And for probably the previous 3 or 4 years, I've been thinking about coaching. So here was a great opportunity. Also, it helped me divorce from the game. And you hear not just cricket, sports around the world, just that fallout when professional players retire from sport, how do they fill the void? And it's tough because, even little things when you retire, I was a very high maintenance player with my body. There was 13 hours of rehab I was doing to actually get to training. So when you retire, that's 13 hours of free stuff, what you'd like, but you've got to be able to fill it. So going straight into coaching, still I was getting my cricket fix. Professionally, I was going where I wanted to go. And, without doubt, that helped me sort of divorce from being a player but still be involved. And within that 2 years, I was doing a little bit of, Triple M, which was more general, breakfast fill-ins. ABC just sort of started, and it was actually a Shield final up in Queensland because the Cricket Academy had moved up there. That I commentated the final for ABC, and it was the first time I really felt part of the coverage and loved it. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't working up in Queensland, so I decided to bring my family home. But it's all about timings because, as you said, it was either Channel 9 on TV or ABC radio, which I was doing with Skull and Jimmy and Drew and Peter Roebuck, those sort of guys. But, back then you made your money really from speaking gigs at the test matches. But then Fox Sports decided to do domestic cricket, and God love them. And we just had this, wonderful team, captained by Brendan Julian, AB, Alan Border, Mark Waugh and Greg Blewett and myself. So it really gave us time just doing 50 over cricket to develop your skills and to build. So, and from that, probably it was in the 4th or 5th year at Fox that the Big Bash started to explode. And that first year on Fox Sports was absolutely massive. And now we see to what it's become now. But, a lot of things fell in place, Dan. If you're trying to make it in the media, even 2 years, 3 years earlier, there was certainly no, Fox Sports besides when we used to do overseas tours.
Yeah, it's been great in terms of opening things up for so many people, and we've seen your skills come to the fore, and someone like you works so well for the Big Bash type format because you can inject your comedy, but we've also seen you work so well in the long form of the game. And that brings me on to, before we get on to your playing career, which I can't wait to delve into, the upcoming summer. What's the situation, do you think, amid COVID? Are we going to get a test series here in Australia? What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good call. I mean, at this stage, being in Melbourne, we're still in lockdown, but, we're hopeful, it'll open up before the cricket season. But, if the remaining states, stay at the level they are, I'm confident that we'll get a full international summer. Probably only the Afghanistan test I'm not sure about.
Which we won't lose any sleep over, let's be honest.
No, and they've got to weigh it up, Dan, haven't they? To come for 2 weeks quarantine, for a game at the Wacker, is it actually worthwhile? Can we get more games? If the other tests go ahead, can we look after, obviously the Wacker? Can India play a couple of more one-day games potentially? And the Big Bash, should be fine, really. I still think even if it was just domestically based and we got the good Australian players playing, particularly in that sort of the last couple of weeks, I think we're fine. So at this stage, optimistic and can't wait to be calling it.
Fantastic. We know you as a swing bowler. We loved watching you as a swing bowler. I can't imagine you always were growing up. There isn't a kid at 8, 9 years of old that says, I want to bowl swing. They want to bowl fast. Or when I was growing up, because of Warnie, we wanted to bowl spin. It was either fast or spin. So where did the swing bowling aspect come in, and were you a tearaway quick in your younger days?
It's a good question, because even when I was growing up, no one wanted to bowl spin. There was no SK Warne. It was Dennis Silly, and I just thought I was going to be an out-and-out quick. And it wasn't until about my second season for Victoria and my great coach, Ian Redpath, one of the legends of Australian cricket, walks up, and whenever you were trying to bowl too fast, there was only one guy he mentioned, and it was Wes Hall, because he obviously played against Wes Hall. That was the previous. And I remember him saying, what are you doing you think you're Wes Hall, do you? We've picked you to swing the ball. And at that stage, I thought I was going to progress and get quicker, and I was already bowling into the breeze because we had Merv Hughes, down breeze. And the ball did move, but, it was sort of when the action went well, it swung out. When I fell away a bit in, I really didn't have much control over it. So I was probably 19 then. So then it really took a couple of years to actually develop the ability to have that stock outswinger all the time. But the thing is, swing's hard to learn to bowl. I mean, I was fortunate that I was sort of a natural swing bowler, but to have the control to be able to, bowl 8 out of the 10 balls, in that avenue of apprehension that I like to talk about is important. And back to what you're saying, swing bowling isn't sexy. Terry Alderman, I remember in 1981, took all those wickets, and, I liked him, but I didn't love him. But it wasn't until 1989 Ashes, when I was already playing for Victoria, and Sir Richard Hadley at that stage, I took a real invested that if I'm going to be these swing bowlers, they're the type of role models you need. But also, then you're never going to be the glamour boy. You're never going to be the spearhead A-grade. You're just going to be the backup fella here. But guess what? You still get gigs. So
exactly.
But there's something rewarding about bowling something that's not that common. Even at the moment, we don't have a pure swing bowler. That's probably one spot that could be filled, particularly in England. But no, the roundabout way, till that day that Ian Redpath said, stop trying to be Wes Hall and swing it. I thought I was going to be an out-and-out quick.
Maybe take us back a little bit earlier than that. When did you know you were good enough? And you had to go through that transition of pure pace to swing bowling. But when did you think, at what stage did you go, I'm actually better than the average kid and just about every other kid who plays cricket in this country, I might be able to make it and actually have a proper career?
That's a really good question, because, generally when you're going through the grades, you're only looking forward. You sort of don't really review yourself, and you certainly don't look back. And I just remember I just loved playing so much. But if you'd asked me at 12 years of age and I'm playing for the Springvale South Cricket Club, that I could play turf 1 for Springvale South, that'd be as high as I'd got. I would have given away my soul then. You know what I meant? They were like idols for me. And really, I didn't play a lot of rep cricket really young until about 15, and then it went from nothing to at 15, injured the whole year when I was 16 virtually. 17 took the most wickets in grade cricket in Melbourne, and then you're playing for Victoria at 18. It's sort of, so from 15, how am I going to get to district cricket? 18, your career's on the path. But even then, I still didn't deeply believe I was going to play for Australia. It was still a dream. So that shows the gap between state cricket and playing for Australia. It is that big a gap. Also back then, Australian cricket was quite strong, and under Bob Simpson mainly, you had to have 2 or 3 good years. It wasn't, 4 or 5 games. And, I remember Michael Bevan's the same age. We played a lot of underage cricket together and for Australia and against each other. And he got 1,000 runs, I think, when he was about 20. I'd got 40 wickets. But the feedback was sort of, but you're going to need another couple of years of that till you get a go. And it sort of worked out a bit the same for both of us. It took until we were, 22, 23 to get picked for Australia. But there was no complaining. That's just the way it was back then. And I think, particularly with the batting, how many of those guys would be playing right now and unfortunately never got a shot.
Exactly right. And it wasn't too different with the bowling. But you did burst onto the scene. I mean, you took 258 wickets in 78 first-class games, but 6 of them came on your debut for Victoria against WA in 89-90, 6 for 37. How did that transpire? Did you have any idea you were capable of that on debut?
Well, I did have a massive mullet at this stage, and that gave me a lot of confidence that I could put off the batsman with this. Well, Gilly reckons I look like the bus driver out of The Simpsons. Otto Man, when he's driving the bus side on, the mud flap goes there. He reckons he saw a vision of me running in. I look like Otto Man. But the thing is, even for that first game, I'd been 12th man about 6 or 7 times. So I was really starting to get really annoyed. So I was playing the one days, no problems. And then it was always, 40 minutes before the game, Ian Redpath once again would come up and say, "How old are you, Flem?" 18. "Oh, you got years ahead of you. Make sure you run out the drinks properly, okay?" "Yeah, no worries, Reddit, And so I finally get the call and, I felt ready. I think we had a second 11 the couple of games before and I'd got wickets. But to show the disparity between where Western Australian cricket was compared to Victorian cricket in 88, 89, they're coming off 3 titles. They win the toss on a green seamer at the Junction Oval and they still bat. So that's just saying, we'll just get enough runs. We'll bowl Victoria out. And second ball, Jeff Marsh nicks to Tony Doddermate, who drops it. Oh, no. And then every nick just happened and got stuck after that. But all it did, I suppose, was once you have your first big game, that happened to be the debut game, I feel my best ball can get wickets at this level. But we had strong fast bowlers with Merv and Dodders and Paul Rifle, and Dennis Hickey was around then. So, I think it was really tough getting a game. So once you got a game, you wanted to make the most of it. But, the first couple of years were almost dreamlike. Wickets in the first year, wickets with Paul Rifle second. We win the Shield, and you just think we're just going to keep going that way. But guess what? Cricket and life doesn't work like that, does it? But those first couple of years were just amazing.
I understand that you roomed with Mervyn Hughes for a large part of your Victorian career. Did you room with him from early on? Because I can imagine that would be incredibly intimidating. And what was it like rooming with Mervyn Hughes overall?
First game for Victoria, up in Queensland, got my HSC results 2 weeks before I passed. So for all those say that fast bowlers are the dumb ones, did pass. Going up the lift, and I'm rooming with Merv, who's just taken those 13 wickets and a hat trick, right? So, and Tony Doddermate and Michael Dimatina are going, "Mate, good luck when you get up there, mate." And I'm just going, friggin' hell, what's ahead of me? walk into the room and he doesn't give me much. There's a double and a single. He goes, what one do you want? And I go, single. And then he didn't talk for about 5 minutes, and I'm just, God, is he going to eat me? Is he going to belt me up? Because he looks like the Hell's Angels, you know. And then he puts his arm around me and goes, mate, you're going to be all right. So we roomed for the next 6 years together.
Wow.
See, and nothing prepares you, Dan. Like, I'd never seen that much hair on a man's body. You know what I mean? And he was basically a stomach with little limbs on it, you know. And he had a natural alarm clock. I won't tell you what it was, but it was set for about half an hour before we left for the ground. And it was smelly, and you could hear it in China. Just natural.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to work out what it was.
But you know what he was? We didn't bowl, very similar. Like, he never bowled a ball in the batsman's half. You know, he basically just wanted to bowl bounces. Yeah. And obviously, as a swing bowler, I was bringing them forward. So it was not unlike bowling with McGrath, that even though we're all right-arm seamers or swingers, their natural length was pushing the batsman back, and mine was bringing them forward. So I reckon that really helped. It was quite a good bowling partnership where the batsman was never quite balanced. But, you know, his philosophy, you know, he used to come in after Australian games absolutely cooked, carrying 130 kilos, bowling 30 overs. But who was still going hardest on the last day? You know, it was Merv, you know, sledging, bouncing, you know, willingness to win. And I think him and Tony Doddermaid were great role models for particularly myself and Paul Rifle. That's the sort of persistence, mental toughness that you need if you even thinking about playing for Australia. So those two were really important role models.
You spoke about mental toughness there. I mean, you talk about the bowling depth in the 90s. I mean, the batting was scary as it was. I mean, growing up in WA, I remember our batting lineup at times was Hussey, Langer, Martin, Moody, Gilchrist. Kadich, you know, when they weren't in the Australian team, just ridiculous. And the bowling wasn't too different. I mean, you talk about Adam Dale and Andy Bickle, Michael Kasparitz, Julian, Angel, Rao, Rifle, who you mentioned, yourself, who was part of that group who got chances in the Australian team, but it was so hard to get it and stay there. How difficult was that to contend with mentally, just the incredible competitiveness for positions?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the only positive with the fast bowling stocks is that there's a natural attrition rate, isn't there? Particularly back then, you know, there was the odd injury, and then you just had to get in and make the most of it. And then, unfortunately, you know, I was probably as injury prone, probably not Bruce Reid-ish, but more Craig McDermott. Like, me and Billy played an Ashes series together. Besides opening the bowling on the first morning, I don't think we're on the ground at the same time at any other stage. We kept limping off. But, no, it was. I found the Australian, just, you know, Victoria was an interesting culture. You know, it was a bit of dog-eat-dog culture. You know, probably always looking to see what you were doing wrong, whereas I found with the Australian team there just seemed to be a lot more respect for you as an individual and backing you. And I felt at times it was easier playing for Australia than Victoria. That you know, your role was defined. You know, in that time, you know, Bob Simpson, Alan Border, Taylor, those types like to have a swing bowler, probably to carry on from Terry Alderman. So even if I wasn't playing, I was generally in the squad, 12th man. And even in one-day cricket, you know, they had a real, I think even to this day, you know, wickets in power plays, whether it's one-day cricket or T20 cricket, is just premium. So there was a confidence that even if I got hit for runs, particularly cover drives, that's fine. We want you swinging the ball and trying to get wickets. So, you know, just having that role, you know, really helped. But yeah, when you're out of the team and you're trying to get back in, and we went through a stage where we played Warney and Maisie, Tim May a lot.
Yeah.
So basically, we had McDermott and one other spot. And then when McGrath took over the mantle for McDermott, you know, even Colin Miller played a fair bit. He was a great spinner.
Yeah.
There's one spot between Casper, Bick, Chip, Joey, myself, Pistol, you know. It was tough.
And that came to the fore in those Australia A games, that famous summer in, I think it was 94, 95, when, I mean, you had so much goddamn talent, you just played them against each other and they made the final. What were those games like to play? And I'm pretty sure you played for Australia in the final series. What was that like when you were up against Australia A playing for Australia, and you may have been playing for Australia A earlier on in the series?
You maybe should have broached that question to Mark Taylor. I don't think Tubby thought it was a whole lot going on.
He didn't like it, did he?
Interesting. The first game we played was in Adelaide and I was 12th man. And funny enough, seeing what happened in the finals, Paul Rifle's playing for Australia A, and he says, you know, this isn't fair. If you're the 12th best cricketer in Australia, but you're not playing, but the 23rd one is, it's not a good system. And then obviously in the finals, we took Pistol and almost, you know, played him to help our chances, really. But I remember the next game, I'm bowling to Matthew Hayden up at the Gabba. So when I'm going down to fine leg, what do you think the feedback I'm getting? So I'm getting smashed. The big-nosed Victorian's bowling to the hometown boy. I look at my shirt and it does say Australia. I'm playing for Australia. And that just continued, and then they just caught fire. You know, no one more than Greg Blewett. You know, Blue didn't even start in the Australia A team. He comes in, he's dominating, gets himself in the test team, scoring hundreds. Final in Sydney, I bowled a Bluey, and I might have had a few beers the night before. Well, I definitely did. Bowling actually just before that, we played a Sydney test a couple of weeks before, and it was probably as good as I bowled. Beat Graham Gooch, who was a wonderful opener for England, beat him 3 times, ball swinging, perfect ball on middle. He nicks it through to heels, 1 for none, go down to fine leg, SCG crowd, standing ovation. I thought, for a Melbourneite, I've been playing Shield games there and copying it. You know, this is a highlight. 2 weeks later, we're playing Australia A, bowled 3 half volleys to Greg Blewett. He hits them all for 4. Walk down to the same area. I've got none for 12, and they give me another standing ovation. Those fickle bastards. And then the final at the MCG. I knew it was the end. You know, cracking games. Yeah. You know, everyone's barracking for Australia A.
Oh, completely.
We get the trophy, and we jog the lap, and we get booed the whole way. So you can see Tubby Taylor's face that this is not happening again. But even watching on the World Series Classics, they were amazing games. But what about the depth of Australian cricket?
Scary. I remember at the time it was just, I mean, we would kill for that batting depth right now. The bowling's maybe not too dissimilar now. We've got a lot of options, but batting-wise, like, I mean, completely different.
Let's be honest. You know, I think the quicks are better than my era. You know, this is, you know, an all-time, you know, greatest bowling lineup, really. But, there's probably 2 batting spots that, you know, those guys that were playing for Australia A would be feeling pretty easy right now.
Pretty easily, you would think. So what was the discussion like from someone like a Mark Taylor before that game? Because I imagine it would have been hugely embarrassing if Australia lost to Australia A.
Yeah, see, that's the difference between older players and younger players. So, you know, for myself and Stewie Law and co, you know, we were sort of still living the dream, really. You know, we're going out, having a good time, training hard. So we sort of played a bit like there's nothing to lose. But it'd be interesting that in hindsight to talk, you know, to Tubby, to Heels, you know, who later, you know, lost their spots, didn't they? That big change when that, you know, Steve Waugh took the captaincy, Gilly took the from Heels. You know, I think they were probably feeling the pressure for their spots there, and there's no doubt they would have been thinking, what happens if we lose? You know, what's the flat going to be like? So that's what made it so competitive. You know, one team with nothing to lose and the other with everything to lose, really. And they both got down last over. But I really enjoyed watching them back. You know, and some of the names. You know, Shane George.
Yes,
love Georgie. We went on a youth tour of the Windies together. You know, he was a character. He was the only player I ever batted with. We're in the West Indies under-20s. Quicks are on. And normally, you meet the incoming batsman and they go, what's happening? Oh, he's doing this. Before you could say anything, Georgie would just go, are they bowling fast? Are they bowling fast? Are they going to bowl bouncers? They bowl bouncers, and I'm not hanging around. Brutal honesty. We love you, Georgie. Aussie Mac, Peter McIntyre playing.
Yes.
Rowley, these guys were seriously good Shield players.
Well, no doubt. It was crazy times. I remember actually going to an Australia A game. I can't remember who they were playing in that series, but I think Paul Rifler was running to the boundary, chasing a boundary-bound delivery. And I was with one of my mates' dads, and he said, watch, he's not chasing as hard as he should because he wants it to go for 4, so he's a better chance of playing for Australia than the guy bowling. That's how crazy it was then.
But even the Australia A, I reckon we went to the Windies and my shoulder fell out, had an operation. I played one game for Australia A the next year. They were big games. We played the West Indies January 1st, I reckon, SCG, packed. So even though we weren't playing Australia, those Australia A games were still massive.
They were awesome. You made your Test debut around the same time, 1994, against Pakistan in Rawalpindi. What stands out from that moment, the moment you were told you were firstly going on the tour, and then the moment you're told you're going to wear a baggy green in anger for the first time?
Yeah, it's interesting. Talked about the dream of getting the baggy green as a 10-year-old, progressing quite quickly into first-class cricket. I actually worked at the Australian Cricket Board for 2 years in administration. It was a great idea by the ACB to give a young guy some administration in there. But what I used to do with my boss, Ronnie Steiner, we used to kick the players out. So I'd be giving the clothing out and giving baggy greens. I remember giving it to Paul Rifle. And so that sort of just made it worse because I had them in my hand, but I'm giving them out. And so I played some one-dayers and got picked for this tour. And, I've never spoken to anyone, but I think I was more – back then you went for 10 weeks, and there was no separation, tests and one-dayers. And there was a fair few one-dayers, so I think I was definitely going to play the one-dayers, but a real backup test bowler. I think McDermott, McGrath, even someone like Joe Angel, I think they were hoping he'd fill like a Merv Hughes role, that enforcer role. And then McGrath tore his quad, and there's still no certainty. And then we just happened to have this training session the day before, and I think they weren't the balls we used in the game, but they just swung everywhere. And remember bowling really well and still had no expectation of playing. And then I get the tap from Tub that you're in, So the baggy green was in my we had these big coffins back then. And I never wore it until I actually had that time. And so to play it, well, it's the realisation of a dream, Dan. And, once you play one, you want to play heaps, but at the end of the day, you still take one over nothing. So for me, it was just like, this is a dream come true. But what you want to do, I want to play another test. And, it was pretty flat. And we batted beautifully, declared. I didn't get a hit. And I ended up getting 4 wickets in the first innings. So that sort of sealed, well, I think my best balls can get wickets at this level. And I reckon I'll get another test match here. And then, obviously in my wildest dreams, I wasn't thinking about it, getting a hat trick. On that second innings, when they're 2 for 500, we just want to get off the ground. Do you know what I mean? And everyone had been talking about the song Underneath the Southern Cross I Stand, and I've been part of the team for probably 8 or 9 months and not sung it because we hadn't won a one-day series and I hadn't played a test or we hadn't won a test while I was there. So I'm going, we're not going to do this. And then when Tub tells me to bowl, get 1 wicket, get Inzi, I got an LBW in Pakistan, so things were obviously happening. And then my hat-trick balls to a guy. I don't know, did you ever get a hat-trick when you were playing?
Never. I never got close. In the backyard, maybe.
But generally, they're first ballers, aren't they? You get 1, you get 2, So I'm bowling to a guy on 237. Salam Malik. And I just remember releasing the ball, it's through, and it was just surreal. Did he just hit that? And then Billy and Joey picked me up and got the hat-trick and, we were just pumped. The crowd's going nuts. But then the highs of test, I learned very quickly about the highs of competitive sport and the depths of low. So I've just got a hat trick, pretty pumped. Then within half an hour, Mark Taylor grabs the ball and he gets a wicket. Like, he's got the worst bowling action in any form of cricket. And he bowls this half tracker that nearly bounces twice. Rashid Latif spoons it to Bevo. Bevo has enough chance to do the right thing, drop the ball. Like, I think we had drop it. Catches it. Tubby got 1 for 4, and you know what he does, the selfish bastard? Takes himself off. So I think he's got a bowling average of 4, Tub. And then just to nail it, he throws the ball to his mate Slats, and Slats gets a wicket. He's got 1 for 10. So that totally demeaned my whole hat trick, that.
You were robbed of a fiver by the skipper.
5, but I've taken 3, but Tubby Taylor's got a test wicket. Shocking.
An amazing moment for you though. And I mean, even though I wasn't in Australia, there probably would have been a lot of media hype for you straight away. You're obviously well known in the game, but a test match hat trick on debut is crazy. How did you deal with all the attention that came with it?
What disappointed me, but pay TV hadn't hit Pakistan, because if the Rawalpindi, Tonight Show, I would have been the main man. I would have come out, beautiful music, probably a bit Akadaka. I would have been a star. But it was an interesting story. It was the year before Foxtel started. So the next tour to the West Indies, Fox covered it, but they didn't cover this, and Channel 9 didn't. Well, they never really covered Pakistan tours. So all of a sudden, the footage is got some currency. And I can't remember who the Channel 9 sports boss was, but when I got home, he said, mate, we tried to get it, but what we normally pay for a 90-second thing, they put it up 1,000-fold. So I didn't see it for about 18 months. And there was an English VHS, monthly cricket VHS. And I had a mate from England who I played league cricket with goes, mate, I've just seen it. And he shipped it out to me. So it took me 18 months. And then I don't think it was till YouTube that many people actually saw it. So in some ways it was almost the invisible test hat trick. But thank God they kept it. But in all seriousness, though, the hat trick was, funny. And obviously I do a lot of corporate speaking and those 3 balls take about 68 minutes. I've timed it for now. But the 4 in the first innings was the big one, Dad. That I knew my best ball can get anyone out. But unfortunately for me, I hurt my shoulder in the one days and had to pull out of the next test. And that sort of was a bit of a continuation for the next 6 years.
No doubt. Before we carry on with your career, so obviously the Aussies in that era had a bad image when it came to sledging and so on and so forth, and it only got worse as years went on. What are the Pakistanis like and the Indians like when it comes to that stuff? Because I can't imagine they're angels.
No, but we had Joe Angel, which was really important. No, it was interesting because, there was always a lot of chatter out there. I remember that the following tour, 98 Rawalpindi Test match, I'm walking out at 8 because Warnie's injured, and the ball's reversing everywhere, and they got Shoaib Akhtar, Waqar Yunus, Wazim Akram, and all the batters are going, get on the front foot, negate the swing. And I'm thinking, no, go back, because that gives you more time to not get hit, right? So come in, and I don't know what happened. First ball, I got forward, Wazzy bounces me, right? And it just goes straight past my face like that, and he's into me, but I can't understand what he's saying. And the slips are into me, blah, 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 blah. Comes in again. I play for the in-swinger. He bowls the out-swinger, so I miss it by about 1.5 meters. So there's sledging. There's a bit of laughter, which is a bit embarrassing. Next one, play a cover drive, in-swinger, misses leg stump. Now there's a lot of laughing, a lot of talking. Wazzy's sledging me. But it's a lot of it's in their local language. So really I'm unaffected. So they're all going hard. And then all of a sudden, I don't know who it was at Gully, he just yells out to Wazzy, come on, Wazzy. He's poo-pooing his pumps. I said, bloody hell. And then I was back with heels. There was a spinner at the other end. So when we got on strike, we're slow, like that. And then Wazzy comes around the wicket and wide of the crease. I think it's a bouncer. It's a Yorker. So it angles in, swings away, knocks out off stump, and it was the best ball I ever faced. I loved watching Macran. But with the chitter-chatter, don't worry about that. That happened with every team.
Brilliant. What a story. You were in and out of the Test team, weren't you, between that era, 94, and then 99, 2000, when Australia goes on that incredible world record run of 16 straight Test wins. You're a real purple patch in the side in 99, 2000, 31 wickets in 6 Tests against India and your bunnies in Pakistan. Was that the best period of cricket in your life, that summer, and the form you were able to show?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, even for Victoria, I reckon after that second year, 20, I never completed a whole season, unfortunately, and so to play all 6 Test matches was a bonus. The one thing I remember about that series was, obviously we'd won the World Cup. We'd had a Sri Lankan tour that was pretty tough. They were such a great team, Sri Lanka, in the home conditions. John Buchanan took over from Jeff Marsh. And there was a real shift. Buchanan, in my couple of years, he was really good, really important. Didn't tell us how to play, even though he did play a bit of first-class cricket. Mm. But he posed a lot of questions, and a lot of it was about, what's our legacy? And I reckon he helped meld a very good Australian team to become a great Australian team with the questions. We've got the Invincibles. Who are we going to be? Names thrown around like the Dominators. Well, if you're going to be the Dominators, can you be half-hearted at training? No. Do the Dominators just score a 3 and over like every other team? No, we're going to go for 4. Are we going to set ring fields in one-day cricket, or, at times are we going to try wickets? Well, if you dominate, you do that. So it was a really good theme, and I reckon he helped it. And I forgot about it. Gilly brought it up a couple of years ago. We went around the room in that first Test match against the Pakistan. What's our goal for the summer? And different blokes come up with things. And I just said, I want to sing the song 6 times this summer. There was a bit of laughter because sometimes a lot of people thought, taking the mickey, which I did a lot. Mm. But with this team, if you look at this team, why couldn't we sing the song 6 times? And my main goal for each game was to be the best bowler in each game. And obviously, when you're playing Pakistan, they've got Akram, Akhtar, Waqar, we've got McGrath and Warne. I'm going to have to bowl pretty well to be the best, but, that's my standard. And the second one was to sing the song. And generally, if I was the first one, we were going to do the second one anyway, because I just loved it. And having that AFL mentality, local footy, singing the song, I loved it. And, what happened? We did. Probably for the only time ever, or it might have happened one other time, that we actually won the 6 Test matches. So in that Sydney Test match against India, that celebrations to win all 6 is something that I'll never forget. I was starting to get really bad knees, like I wasn't training a lot. But it's funny, if you've done the work beforehand and you're in good form, you keep playing. You keep playing. Yeah. And that's, I have a little bit of a philosophy against all this resting and rotating, because in a physical sense, it makes sense, when you're getting into that danger zone or red zone. But form fluctuates. Yeah. Form fluctuates. How do you switch that on and off? You can't. And I generally want to play more when I was in form. If I'm out of form, I can live with getting dropped because I'm out of form. But when I'm in form, I want to keep playing. And that summer said to me, as lack of training I could do, really painful knee tendonitis, but you're in red hot form, you keep playing.
Some of those wins between 99 and 01 were ridiculous. I mean, it was complete domination, especially the windy summer in 2001. I remember as a fan sometimes thinking, look, this is just too easy, to the point where it's getting a little bit boring. Did you ever think that as players, that this is actually a bit too easy for Test cricket?
No, it was interesting. I mean, that was the storybook, wasn't it, at the time, that it was boring. And then within about 5-6 years, when we start to lose, people were wanting those days again. So you've got to be careful what you wonder for. No, you get the chance to speak corporately, about complacency. Steve Waugh was really big on that. Complacency is our enemy. And I found that success actually breeds more success. I remember, and we had four really good pillars. The baggy green was a big pillar. It was pride in playing for Australia, for the people, for the players that had worn it before us, the passion that the song provided. And obviously we had great leadership, and we had a lot of fun with the nerds and Julios and that sort of type. So there was some real ingredients into that mix. But the song was very powerful. If we were struggling and, do we really want to sing the song? I know, I switched on there. And I reckon there was the one-day game. Around that time we broke one-day record too, but I reckon we dropped one. I remember Gilly just sort of saying, it feels weird not to sing the song. I bloody hate it. So, you asked whether it got boring and all that. No, I reckon success breeds more success, and it breeds more hunger. That was my learnings of that period.
And you should have had a second hat-trick in that period as well. Warney dropped one in the slips against India en route to your 5 for 31. How do you approach that with Shane Warne? Because he is obviously a megastar and the biggest personality in the team. I imagine if it was someone younger, you may have let your frustrations out a little bit. How do you approach a drop catch for a hat-trick with SK Warne?
Yeah, I think there's an expectation from the Australian public with Australian cricketers that they can bat, they can bowl, and they can field. And I don't necessarily blame Warney. I blame the education system. And I think from primary school, from prep grade 1, every kid should be taught how to throw and catch. You know why? Because you cost teammates Test careers. I played 3 tests after that. But it's a long time ago. I've given it up, Dan.
Clearly.
But it was, in all seriousness, it was so funny because you don't have enough time to think this, but I did. I remember releasing the ball. I like to say I wasn't that nervous because, I'd done test hat-trick stuff before, Dan, let's be honest. And I went, oh, no, it's wide. Oh, he's nicked it. He's out. No, he's not. Like, you don't have enough time, but I remember thinking that.
Yeah.
And Warney tapped me on the shoulder afterwards. I can't remember what he said, but he was more shattered than me because at the end of the day, I got 5 for. So I'm on the honour boards, and we were drinking beers at like 12:30. And back then, they'd basically say the bus is leaving at 2 o'clock the next day. Make sure you're on it. So it was a massive party. 5 in a row or 6 in a row that we'd won. So we were starting to build momentum.
Yeah.
My only regret is on those honour boards, Fleming 5 for 30, how good would Fleming 6 for 29, including hat-trick, look? Like, it'd take up 2 spots. It'd be the first one people see. It's not 1 line, it's 2 lines. So, yeah.
And 2 hat-tricks would have been unbelievable as well. On a serious note, though, on Warney, because it's easy to forget, unless you really grew up in that era, just how big of a megastar he was. I mean, we're talking one of the biggest stars in world sport and undoubtedly for a number of years the biggest sporting star in Australia by a mile. So what was he like as a teammate? Was he on a pedestal? Was he one of the boys? How was he amongst the team at the height of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good call because I totally agree that, he was just so much bigger name than the rest of us. And he loved it. He fed it. It worked both ways. He's a showman. He went on that youth tour to that West Indies I was talking about with Shane George, and we didn't know who he was. He was a footballer. But even then, he really loved the attention. He really seeked it. So I always feel when it hit him, he handled a lot better than the rest of us who probably don't want that type of publicity because he'd wanted it. But internally, he was just one of a number of great players. So, team meetings and stuff like that, he wasn't a dominant person. On the field, he was just a warrior. He just wanted to win. Whether he's injured or not, his planning, his execution, was massive. But as I said, like, you know, when you rate the great player, I mean, who's, you know, often get asked, who's the best player you played with? And then straight away, you know, I think of, you know, Ponting, Warne, Gilchrist, McGrath, the War brothers, and that's not including Hayden, Gillespie, blah, blah, blah. But the two freaks that will never show, someone like Ponting, whose legacy only grows and grows, you know, and even in the commentary box, you know, he's the next, well, he's the great commentator, you know, because he's almost still playing or coaching. But we've got Stephen Smith, who's got a comparable record. Well, I mean, we'll see where Smithy ends up when he finishes. You know, McGrath, you know, look at that pace attack we've got now. You know, I wouldn't say any individual, you know, maybe Cummins will get there. But, you know, but Gilchrist and Warne, I don't think we'll see them again.
No.
I don't think we'll see a leg spinner do what Warney did. Even in those World Series Classics, some of them he was bowling the last couple of overs. And then for Gilly, I mean, how good a player was Brad Haddon? Haddon was a great player, but he averaged 15 less in Test cricket, you know, and probably didn't take the catches because of the wingspan that Gilly took. But if I had to pick one, I'd have to go Glenn McGrath because of his basics. I mean, if you look at his record at home and away against everyone, it's pretty much the same. He averages 20-21. And in some ways, he was the less flamboyant of all of them. He had less tricks than those guys. But he did the basics. You know, his determination, you know, his mental toughness was amazing. That he had no enemy. He got wickets everywhere. But, yeah, back to Warney, you know, you put that in that sort of room. And, yes, he's had, obviously, conflicts, you know, with Steve Waugh and guys like that. But that didn't explode in team meetings or anything like that.
And he was a crucial part of your one-day success as well. And so were you. I mean, you did become a bit of a one-day international specialist later on in your career. 134 wickets at 25.38, an incredible economy rate, considering you were entrusted with bowling at the death a lot, and in two World Cup semi-finals, 96 and 1999. Was it a task that you revelled in, or did it make you nervous? Because that is an enormous stage, the height of one-day cricket, and you've got to get it done, you know, when there's so much pressure on you.
Well, the thing is, I say to young fast bowlers, there's not many specific roles in cricket, but being the best starter and best finisher, you're getting gigs, and in particular in T20 cricket. So when I first started for Victoria, I just bowled the first 10 overs out as an 18-year-old. Then after a couple of years, you know, worked on bowling at the death for South Melbourne, started to get it for Victoria. So by the time I'd played for Australia, I bowled the last over for Victoria probably the previous 3 or 4 years. So it was a role I wanted to play. You know, there was a couple of times where I didn't. Someone else bowled it and we didn't get over the line. I hated watching that. Like, I reckon the pain of losing the game with the ball in hand is not as bad as the pain of actually being a spectator. So that was ingrained before I played for Australia. So I wanted that role. And in some ways, I talked up McGrath, the best I played with. But, you know, his skills were quite basic. You know, some of the skills that I had were a little bit different, as in, you know, a good Yorker bowler, good change of pace, you know, back when, you know, there was only a few guys that changed the pace. So, you know, I wore it as a badge of honour that, you know, I wanted to start and I wanted to finish, because that's where all the action was, wasn't it? If you're bowling in the middle, they're just hitting gaps and, you know, it'd be a little bit boring. But in one of my first games for Australia, Alan Border's last game in South Africa, and he let me bowl the last couple of overs. You know, South Africa needed 6. They only got 4. And we won the game. And from that day, you know, I virtually, up until the last few one days, you know, I just bowled the last over. So it's easy. You prepare for it. A lot of Yorkers, a lot of change of paces and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, to have that opportunity in the 96 semi-final against the West, which was an incredible game. You know, they should have won it easy and they lost 8 for 30, Warney and McGrath, unreal. But, you know, there's no bigger matchup in world cricket at the time. You know, Courtney Walsh with bat, Damien Fleming with ball. What a matchup. What a matchup.
But you did it again in the 99 semi, of course. And, I mean, it's either that game or the final from last year. That's the best game of cricket ever played, the England-New Zealand final. They went to extra overs. I mean, I was there, lucky to be there. I mean, just insane. And the 99 semi, surely in a one-day sense, is the only game that can compare it if you consider the stakes. When did you sense it changing? Because South Africa were pretty much home. Klusener's smacking everything. When did you sense they might be tensing up here and we've actually got a chance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was over in England too for the final, calling on SEN, and I can see now for the people who commentated that tie in 99 why they rate it so highly, because you just feel part of the game. It was just, incredible. Well, really, we were cooked when Gibbs and Kirsten, and then it was Morty. Morty was amazing when it's almost like he needed the bigger stage. If it was a boring game, let's drift. But we needed him, and he got those 3 quick wickets. And then we felt like we were in the game, really. And then it was only late when probably Paul Rifle drops Klusener and it goes over the fence for 6. And on bowling last over, went, oh, gee, that's a change of momentum. But I must admit, when I was bowling last over, if I had more than 8 runs to protect, I generally backed myself. So there was 9, so I was reasonably confident. But we sort of had a plan of coming around the wicket bowling wide Yorkers, and I was never comfortable with that because I like to use the stumps as a guide, because it was still the era they miss you hit. Whereas now you've got to have Yorkers that hit the stumps and wide Yorkers.
Yeah.
And I remember bowling the first one, and it wasn't that bad. It was close to what we talked about. It wasn't half volley. It was fuller than that. And he smashed it like 1,000 miles an hour. And you hear later, he used to practice that, 120 mile, against a ball machine, just Yorkers. So he was used to Yorkers not quite being right. So it's 5 to win, and you can sense everyone's heads just dropping. Ran in, and the next ball's a half volley. It's a shocker. And this one goes 2,000 miles an hour, and it's a tie. It's just a tie. And the crowd's going nuts. I'm getting donuts from the teammates, donuts. And then it's sort of funny, Dan, when you look back, people go, did you think about bowling a wide or a no ball? I just had this one thought that I have to bowl him out now. Just this clear voice goes, you have to bowl him out. So I said to Steve Waugh, I want to come over the wicket, because all along it's the way I bowled. I was always over the wicket to right and left-handers at the death. And this is a tick for Steve Waugh's the leadership. Like, Tugger was a really good leader, as in he backed his players who backed himself. I often think if that was a dictatorship captain who said, no, this is the bowling plan, we're losing that World Cup. Around the wicket, Yorkers were not going to work to him. So in some ways, Steve Waugh wins the World Cup by that decision. Come over the wicket, ring field, and I think I've just got to knock him over here. And I bowl a bit of a half-tracker. So Klusener wasn't thinking about it. Miss hits. And this is where it gets interesting. I just don't remember any calling, just running. So when you talk about when panic set in, I reckon it was that third ball for South Africa, because they sort of had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Then they've got everything to lose. So the ball dribbles to Darren Lehman, and Buff misses from about 2 metres away. Like, if he hits, we're into the World Cup. So I'm walking back going, Buff, I hope that's not their last chance to win the World Cup. And then the boys said afterwards, Klusener and Alan Donald didn't talk. So there's still 3 balls to go. If I'm batting with one of the Wards or Bevo, you just go try and hit through the field. If it gets in the last ball, let's go. And I feel like the panic had already set in. And then the 4th ball was a good one. Nice Yorker. I'll give myself a tick there. And then he hits, and I swear Lance didn't call. And it's sort of close to my right arm, but I can't get it. And I know Donald's staying in his crease. And Mark Waugh, indoor cricket style, has a go at the stumps. I get it. And I proceed to underarm the ball to poor Adam Gilchrist, because it's seriously going about 1 centimetre an hour. You know what I mean? I could have ran behind him and got it myself, to be honest. And by this stage, Klusener's already in the sheds. Donald's dropped his bat. It's just nuts. And then we're just through. And it's like, we're like kids at a kindergarten, we're jumping up and down. But then there's no security at this World Cup. So there's like 20,000 people like converging. And of course they want memorabilia. They want to grab stumps, and Gilly's grabbing them. And then we got in and, we just felt like we got out of jail. But it was interesting. 3 years before, when we got out of jail against the Windies, we had a massive night. It was just like, how did that happen? Went really hard, but not this time. Few beers because there was a bigger thing. And then from those games against South Africa, I knew at training we were going to win. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, we can win from any situation. And so to win at Lord's was just magnificent, particularly for 8 of us that had been in that 96 final, lost it, to get another chance was fantastic.
An incredible moment. The rolling of the ball, was that presence of mind? Like, I just need to be 100% careful here, even though, as you said, there was no danger of it not being a run out? Or was it the actual panic of the situation that you ended up rolling it?
Well, I think the late, great Richie might have said to someone, it's one of the most astute things I've ever seen on the cricket field. I couldn't say much more because you don't train for that, Dan, do you? You don't train for that. So I reckon in that split second thinking, if I throw it and throw it over Gilly's head, if I half volley him, I just took out all those parameters, and like to think that it was more coolness of going. The only other one is the other story is when I talked about the nerds and Julios in the Australian team. You're either a Julio, take too much, Julio Iglesias, Warney, Brett Lee, Brennan Julian, the Godfather, or you're a nerd like Merv, Maisie, me. We used to have these great battles, and 2 nights before we went 10-pin bowling, believe it or not. 10-pin bowling. And the Julios won. You'd think it's a nerdish, quiet pastime, but I wonder even then if that just in my brain going, mate, I need to take out all those parameters I talked about and just underarmed a ball, because in hindsight, it was the right thing to do.
Undoubtedly. And it makes that moment that we've seen so many times even better, because it's just such a unique viewing experience as opposed to the normal throwback to the keeper.
With the underarms got a bad name, with Trevor Chappell. And I reckon I just even the ledger for underarms.
You've changed the context in Australian cricket forever. You spoke about the celebrations not being epic after the semi. I'm sure they were after the final. I've always wondered, what's Steve Waugh like when it came to celebrations? Because he always seemed so stern. He always seemed so serious. Yes, we know he loved the John Williamson songs and the rest, but is he someone that did let himself go a little bit and drop that guard, if you like, in those moments?
No one stayed later than S. Waugh. No, very good celebrator. I think it was Southern Comfort was his go back then, I reckon. He would have finished a bottle there. No, very witty man. He's a popular teammate, Tug. He's good fun. Really good sense of humour. Often, I'd be with him to come up with our nerdish, uniforms and all that sort of stuff. Before he was captain, he's a really good leader in the team, like an older player you could go to. And then when he was captain, you sort of gave him a bit of arms width because you didn't look like you were going to suck up to him. And also his favourite music was country and western. And there's only so much Kenny Rogers I could listen to, seriously. Tugger, give us a rest, will you? The boys, I must admit, when the time, you talk about the hunger. Well, for me, celebrating was a closure of each test match, each one day, it's a journey. And if you're not celebrating or closing those journeys, what are you playing for?
Yeah. And
I would say that most of my teammates shared that it's a closure of a journey, and with one, even more, we need to celebrate this. And, I can't think of too many blokes who didn't really have a crack.
Was he the best captain you ever played under in all forms of cricket, Steve Waugh?
I'd probably, if I was going to split hairs, I'd probably go Tubby Taylor. What I loved about Tub was he was just so composed. And generally bowlers can get a bit angry and angsty and impatient. And look, Tubby could have been having the worst day of his life, and you'd never know. He'd just be chewing that gum, yup. Flem, that'll do you. Whereas, most captains, teapot, like, what are you doing that for? It's like you've cut their arm off. I'm not meaning to bowl crap. I'm just bowling crap. Whereas Tub was probably the only captain that said, oh, Flem, thanks very much, that'll do you. But you knew, shit, I'm going to have to bowl better than that. So I loved him. But Tugger was influential. He's probably the first captain to write down your role definition. Like Tubby had verbalised it. But we'd have these meetings and Tugger would have it written out. The numbers, that World Cup, we actually got our numbers put on there. As far as I know, that was the first team to do that. And that legacy now, what sporting team in the world doesn't have their numbers somewhere on their uniform? So another one who loved the history of the game, but also, like to challenge it at times, So those last couple of years with him and Buchanan worked really well together. So and also he's such an inspiring player. That 100 against South Africa before the semi, he walked out. I can vividly remember it now, that red rag. There was no way he was physically coming off that ground without us winning. And also he was important because he played in the mid-'80s when we were losing.
Yeah. And
I reckon, he was always pushing complacency is our enemy and, if your attitude's contagious, is it worth catching, those sort of vibes. And then he'd have a theme for each tour, and I'm that sort of creative person. I like themes, bowlology report, bowlologist. Yeah, I'm a theme guy, so I sort of like that. So I'd sort of put it into my personal goals, the road less travelled and no regrets. And so very fortunate with that with our captains.
And we know how much esteem he held the baggy green in. I mean, he made the team wear it to Wimbledon, for goodness sakes, to support Pat Rafter. But you didn't?
No, I thought I love the baggy green more than anything. And so we won the first test. We're having a big night. And I sort of do recall it brought up a little bit, but I'm thinking, it's just the 375 mils of personality talking here.
That'd be.
So I didn't even give it a second thought, and then rock up, and everyone's got baggy greens except for Warney, the rebel, Mark Waugh, who's probably thinking what I'm thinking, and even that's too cringeworthy for me. But guess what? We get there and there's these huge roars, and I'm thinking, gee, the players are out there. But one by one, as we walked up, they're cheering,
Wow.
And Paddy didn't win, like Goran beat him. It was awesome. Paddy, what a legend. We love Paddy. But there's always going to be fallout, Dan, isn't there? The three guys that didn't wear baggy greens. You can't drop Warney again. He's the greatest leg spinner of all time. He can't drop his brother, Tugger, because, you got Christmas dinners. So the big-nosed Victorian never played another test. Gone.
What a shame. I dare say it wasn't.
Would have wore it.
Yeah, you should have in hindsight. But
one more test.
The only respite on that I can give you, Flem, is that whenever the photos are reproduced from that moment, you're right. It is very lame and cringeworthy. So at least you weren't in the cringeworthy camp.
Not my go.
Speaking of the baggy green, though, I mean, the ball tampering scandal of South Africa, how did that make you feel as someone who had worn the baggy green? Because all we heard about was the fabric of the baggy green has been ripped out here and the damage it's done to the national team and to the fabric of the nation. As someone who has represented the team, did it actually hurt you emotionally in a personal sense as someone who had represented that side and represented the nation?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's such a broad subject. I mean, individually, I was watching it live, disbelief, hoping their excuse was right, not believing it, anger, and then sympathy. Those range of emotions. To actually get to the point where, cheating like that means, and winning the game means more than playing within the rules. And yes, there's grey areas with ball tampering, which I think there will always be. The only time there won't be is the pandemic's brought it to even ground. So I noticed there's less minties getting chewed over in England. But but there's things I think that could have been done. I think Cricket Australia, had a nightmare. If you'd seen the previous tour, that was an angry tour. Clark's 160, one of the great innings going around. Ryan Harris on one leg bowls those 2 Yorkers to win. But it was an ugly series. And for me, South Africa's a tough tour. It's also generally on the end of an Ashes series. One day, South Africa, they're fatigued. And when people are fatigued, they make bad decisions. And that doesn't make an excuse.
No.
But after that first test, with all everything that was going on, Cricket Australia needed to get someone over there to say, listen, everyone, you're talking gaga. This is the way we're going to play. This is the way we're going to win. And then just that press conference, you've been in the media a long time now. How Stephen Smith and Cam Bancroft ended up doing it.
Well, lying initially.
No, you actually take it out of their hands.
Yeah.
It's PR 101. This will end up a blueprint in universities around the world in how not to do things. Lehman goes up. Yes, we understand Cam's reported. You block everything out and you eternalise. And everything from then was just a disaster.
Yeah.
And then, the press conferences for the 3 boys, that was harrowing.
It made it worse initially, that press conference, no doubt, because it blew up overnight and the next morning. But I've always thought it would have been that way regardless, because the vision was damning. If there wasn't that vision of Cam with the sandpaper, putting it down his pants and so on, then it would have been a bit murkier had they not spoken, and maybe it's a different sort of story. But I think whatever the case, because of that vision that they had, which was so stark, even if they hadn't spoken, it still would have been the same reaction, maybe just a delayed one.
Yeah, it was horrible.
It was horrible.
But you talk to a few of the players, even in the morning, it hadn't hit there, it hit here.
Yeah.
So they're a bit oblivious, but and for us Aussies saying that, the South African TV set us up. Well, if you're not doing anything wrong,
exactly.
You can't get set up. So that was not an excuse. But no, I disagree with that. That press conference, it definitely inflamed it because it showed players that really had no idea the enormity of it.
Yeah, completely.
But it should have been taken out of their hands. To where we are now, I think Justin Langer and Tim Payne have done a fantastic job. Like, Tim Payne's done something that no Australians had to do ever. We've kept away from keeper captains, haven't we? As greater leaders as Ian Healy and Adam Gilchrist were. They never did it full time. So he's doing that full time captaining, and particularly that, the first year without Warner and Smith, I think they've been fantastic and probably set up the next culture and next generation.
Great point. We're almost done. It's been fantastic, but these are the obvious questions. The primary school kids could ask these, but it doesn't mean they're not the best questions. I love getting answers on these from former players. The best batsman you've ever bowled to, and why?
Boring, can't split Tendulkar and Lara. Tendulkar in India played mainly one days against him, so you can't bounce him. You can only have 2 out in the first 10 overs. Actually got him a few times. Oh, yeah, we bounced him out. He's no good at the short ball. Oh, no, now he starts setting up for the short ball, hitting it for 6. Wide out swingers. Oh, yeah, he's nicked one. Oh, next one, he plays it later, hits it through point 4. At least he probably didn't get as big as scores. Lara was the one. I only played 1 day against Brian. That's good because he could only bat 50 overs. And I just felt once he got to 10, and because of his weird technique, He hit the ball in unbelievable angles. Obviously, Ponting's the best Australian player. If I had to pick someone out that no one talks about, it's Saeed Anwar for Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because I played a lot against him. He was gifted. Beautiful late timer of the ball, no obvious weakness, good on front and back foot. He was a gun.
Interesting. And best bowler you've ever faced?
Yeah, one of my heroes was him, Akram. Waste of time. Hit him for a 4 once, didn't mean it. The boys are up there going, shot flam. Was he sledging me? And I just go, I don't know. I hit him one knee on the ground, back foot through, point for 4. That was my only scoring shot against him.
Flem, entertaining from start to finish. I've just loved this. It's gone for a while and it's felt like 5 minutes. It's awesome to be able to go through your career and get all those tales in Australian cricket from you and told in such an entertaining way as expected. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. All the best with the Bowlology report and your commentary that we'll see on Channel 7 and the rest. But listen to Damien Fleming's podcast as well, the Bowlology report, and no doubt insightful. And I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the show.
Thanks, Dan, and good luck with your podcast too, mate.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.